Alisa-starr, Alisa-starr. Rubber mouth, breathtaking, so bizarre. Alisa-starr, Alisa-starr. She's your friend. Hi everybody, this is Alisa-starr, and I'm back with another episode of TV, My Favorite Boyfriend. So today we're going to talk about SWAT, which I have avoided for a really long time because I have stopped watching all the cop shows that glorify cops, all the propaganda, which actually is usually kind of related to, I think I've talked about this before. CBS has a hard-on for cops. CBS fucking loves cops. And the propaganda on CBS is strong, which is why SWAT is one of their shows. And, like I said, I've been trying to avoid it, but the thing is I have watched every cop show for the last 50 years. They are kind of like my escape, they're also really, I have a weird sense of time. I have a hard time understanding time at all. I can't tell 2 minutes from 2 hours. And so TV shows, have typically been the rhythm in the background of my life that helps me understand how much time has passed. And at the end of an episode, if I'm working, I have to stand up and stretch. Otherwise, I never can remember to take breaks. So I go through a lot of television, and like I said, cop shows are really regular. They're standard. Something happens in the first act, you're introduced to all the characters, you're presented with a scenario, in the second act, they start to solve things, but they get misled, right? There are a couple of suspects that they focus on that aren't the perpetrator. Third act, they find the perpetrator, and then there's some tension that builds as they try to prosecute him, but in the end, usually, it's resolved, and by the third act, for the most part, the cops get their man. And, I've really enjoyed just the sameness of all cop shows, it's reassuring to me. More than that, in the last 2 years since Black Lives Matter started, actually, it's 7 years since Black Lives Matter started, but in the last 2 years, as I've been thinking about it and studying it, I've realized that all of that propaganda, all of those shows, are misleading you. Now that I've gotten to know some of the statistics of at least the area in which I live, cops in my area solve 13% of the sex crimes that happen in Seattle. 13%. Now, I've been doing some research on child sex abuse, and that's, roughly the same amount of perpetrators that confess to the crime. So basically, they're not doing any legwork in the sex crimes unit in Seattle. They're just, if the guy confesses, the case gets solved. If the guy doesn't confess, they're not investigating. They're not trying to get to the root of the matter. They're not weighing different suspects. That is like I said, that's just it's pure fantasy, right? And I think I didn't realize that until the last 2 years when I started digging deep. So I stopped watching cop shows, and the only reason I picked up SWAT is because I watched TV in Spanish as a way of learning more Spanish. And SWAT, there's a Spanish version on Hulu, because that's another thing I like to do is I'll watch stupid, terrible television shows in Spanish so that I can increase my vocabulary and stand the show. That is what I did with Beauty and the Beast, the TV show, the last one that happened with Krupnik. I forget that bitch's name. She's from Smallville, and she grates on my nerves. But hearing her dubbed over in Spanish, super fun to watch. you know? Like I said, you learn vocabulary. So, I mean, the first scene of SWAT that was advertised was a picture of Shemar Moore standing on top of a tank rolling through LA. So that did not appeal to me at all. I don't want the militarization of our cops. They're already violent enough already. Also, there's no good reason to have a tank in our cities, in any city, really. You know, Iraq, America, tanks do not belong in streets. Tanks, I don't even know where they belong. Like, I'm trying to think of it right now. I definitely just don't want to see a tank rolling through Seattle, is my point. I don't want to see it in any city. There's, like, the cops aren't being attacked en masse by citizens or criminals. There isn't a gunfight on the streets of LA every day, every week. I don't even know if it's like once a year, you know, where the cops and the quote unquote robbers are like standing there exchanging bullets for significant amounts of time. I've never seen that in an American city. Save like we've bombed cities before. The U.S. bombed its own city when the Black Wall Street tragedy occurred. Like, but there's no good reason for a tank. So that turned me off. But like I said, I fucking love learning Spanish, and cop shows reassure me. So I started watching it in Spanish last night. I was trying to have an all-day Spanish day. And the other reason why I ended up relenting and starting to watch SWAT is because over the years, like most adult women, I have become addicted to Shemar Moore's abs. I don't think it's necessarily our fault. He doesn't do anything with a shirt on. Like, he was on Criminal Minds, and he found reasons to take his shirt off while they were hunting serial killers, right? Like, you would think if they were hunting serial killers, he would want more clothes on to defend himself against the serial killers, but no. Like I said, I have become addicted to Shemar Moore's abs. And most of us have. It's like that old thing where, like, when you're exposed to something over and over and over again, when it goes away, you start to crave it. That's like a weird human condition. So I realized in the first episode that hearing SWAT dubbed over in Spanish, first of all, is wonderful. And second of all, it allows me to better fantasize my way through the show. Because basically, this shows hyper-violent, explosive LA that is not actually what LA is like. It is not, I mean, most American cities, like I said, nobody's having suspended firefights with, or like long-term firefights with cops. But in this show, the criminals are organized. They have money, but they're still getting busted by cops, which is fucking ridiculous. If you have money, cops go very, very easy on you. And SWAT's, their mantra is like, we're here to preserve life, but they look like, stormtroopers, and they've got so many guns on them. So, like, when they're in the tank getting ready to go on a thing, they're like, we're trying to preserve life. Which is, it's like the idea of a peace wall. I did laugh out loud when I realized that was the solution that Bill Clinton came up with in the Irish-English talks in 1999. Like, a peace wall? I've never seen a wall that helped people with peace. That's not how that goes. Just like, I've never seen a gun that saved someone's life. They pretty much just kill people. So it's fucking ridiculous. And the only way I can justify this show is just to be like, this is just a fantasy. This is just, what cops imagine they are doing when they're on the streets, rather than what they're usually doing, which is kicking homeless people out of tents, harassing the poor, policing black communities, over-policing black communities, policing black communities violently. Like, that's what I've seen cops do. So this busting in on these doors and saving girls who are caught in the crossfire. No. Most of the time, I mean, the scenes from SWAT are just cop fantasies. And I love a good explosion. I do like watching firefight. Heat was my favorite movie for a long time. I mean, like 15 years. So I get it. I enjoy this kind of action movie too. Just saying that they are good guys is fucking ridiculous. And saying that they're trying to preserve life is fucking ridiculous. And the whole thing is stupid. The whole thing is one of the worst propaganda shows I've ever seen. But like I said, addicted to Shemar Moore's abs, and he does not disappoint. You know, it's funny because I used to say Mark Wahlberg takes his shirt off like a 13-year-old girl who'd just been molested. You know, he's always trying to, like, make sure you like him, right, by taking off his clothes. And I don't know, Mark Wahlberg always seemed kind of desperate about it, whereas Shemar Moore was always like, I got what you want, baby. There's a lot of naked pictures of Shemar Moore, and one of them was my screensaver for, like, another 10 years. I mean, the man is beautifully sculpted. I'll give it to him. When he takes his clothes off, it's nice. I also think that Mark Wahlberg's, I mean, first of all, he, as a youth, he attacked people of color with a gang of other white boys from Boston on a regular basis, and he ended up blinding a Vietnamese man. Just ran into this guy's, like, bodega and fucking beat the shit out of him. And that was what had happened. Like, 3 or 4 different times, Mark Wahlberg and his gang beat up a slew of people of color. And that's just the incidents we know about that were publicized. And this is maybe, I think he was an underwear model by then, when he'd started that shit. Maybe he wasn't. I don't know. It doesn't matter. He's a fucking racist piece of shit, Mark Wahlberg, and his voice is the most annoying thing I've ever heard in my fucking life. So this is an example of 2 men who've been taking their shirts off for 20 years. Mark Wahlberg just repulses me, and Shemar Moore created an addiction. Although Shemar Moore had this good night baby girl thing that he started doing on Twitter, he called one of his colleagues baby girl on the Criminal Minds show, and then girls on Twitter were like thirsty for him to call them baby girl, so he started doing this thing. And it's just, that's another gross thing, is basically I do not like the baby girl dynamic that is thrust into romantic storylines in our culture. It's just fucking gross. It's worse because I've heard so many incest stories in my life, and I've been, like, writing this child sex abuse handbook, what to do when your kid has been sexually attacked, which, by the way, will be out and free June 1st. But more than that, it's, like, I don't know, even if I hadn't heard so many incest stories, it's just creepy. I do not want my lover to call me a baby, and I don't want to call him my dad. That is not sexy. That is just gross. I really enjoyed the Bernie Mac show, partly because he used baby girl in the right context. It was the first time I saw an adult man call a child a baby instead of a woman. And it just seemed so fucking healthy. Like, the Bernie Mac show really reparented me. It was so nice to see how kind he was to those kids, even though they annoyed the shit out of him. But I digress. SWAT is great if you, 1, hear it in another language, 2, can accept the fact that they think they are documenting real life, but it is just a fucked up propaganda fantasy of what it's like to be a police officer. For the most part, they're lazy fucks. They don't investigate. They don't help the public. They harass the public. And in my case, sometimes they tear gas your whole neighborhood every night for months. Just because they don't like your protest signs. So, if you're trying to brush up on Spanish, SWAT is a really good call. If you like explosions, SWAT is a really good call. If propaganda makes you want to set something on fire, just steer clear. It's not worth your exasperation.